Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to present about HEVC H265. It's been a very nice day so far, and I really appreciated all the speakers so far. It's really exciting to be here. I'll be talking about HEVC. I've actually been involved in the development of HEVC. I used to work for Ericsson for quite many years, and Ericsson was actively involved in the development of the HEVC standard. So let's see. So this is what I will try to cover today, a bit about the HEVC history, some very basics about video coding in general. I'll talk about the coding tools in HEVC, how it performs compared to older video codecs, and then I'll mention about the extensions and profiles that exist in HEVC. I'll try also to cover a bit of activities that is currently ongoing, which looks beyond HEVC, and by the end I'll mention about the video codec that my company has developed, which is called XVC, which is a software-focused video codec. I'll try to keep, most of my slides are quite packed with information, but I'll try to not dig into all the details in order to keep the time limit. But about the HEVC history, if we start looking at to the left of this timeline to the top, you'll see that the actual standardization process of HEVC was between 2010 and 2013. That's where the specification was defined, and that's the active development of the standard, and it was performed in a joint collaborative group between MPEG and VKEG, which are two different subgroups of ISO, IEC, and ITUT. So it's a broad international standard which is developed jointly by quite large groups of experts. But before 2010, there was also a phase of exploration activities starting already in 2005. And those explorations were exploring new technology compared to H.264, which was the previous large international standard for video compression. And I also kept in the timeline, you see a couple of old video codecs, because in terms of technology, HEVC is not really that different compared to H.264. And H.264 is not really that different compared to MPEG-2, which is not that different compared to H.261. So if you'd like, you can say that HEVC has evolved over 25 years of continuous development. But for the actual active standardization phase, there was 12 face-to-face meetings with these groups, roughly 200 people at these meetings. You would have very organized, well-defined tool experiments, core experiments, ad hoc groups looking into specific parts of the compression of the codec or the specification, and you could see up to 1,000 different technical contributions per meeting, proposing new stuff or reporting the result of some specific experiment. In total, there were roughly 200 different organizations involved, and probably around 1,000 individuals if you also count the back office supporters and not only those that actually go to the face-to-face meetings. And here you see some of the different major contributors to the standard. If you wonder why they are spread out in this weird fashion, it relates to how they have organized themselves afterwards when it comes to licensing of the technology. And Jan already covered this morning, that there are different patents pools for the licensing of the technology, that if you're implementing HEVC, you'll need to figure out how much you need to pay to these different license pools. And there are also quite a few which are not structured in any pools that you might need to get into to agreement with. So that was about the history. Now I'll jump to the technology, and before talking about the specifics of HEVC, this slide is showing very basic what video compression is about. Probably most of you know about it, but if you just talk about compressing a video, you must whenever you look at a screen or a projected image or your mobile phone, you have a large amount of pixels, like 2 million typically in a full HD picture. You have it's updated 60 times every second, and you have these different color components. So it's a huge amount of data, typically more than 2 gigabits per second if you would stream it completely uncompressed. So you need an efficient way to compress that. You have the video codecs using temporal and spatial prediction, looking at previous frames, looking at previous pixels of the same frame, and you can reduce it. You can have a compression factor of 200 to 1 or even 1,000 to 1, and you get down from 2 gigabits per second to 10 megabits per second or 2 megabits per second or even below that. So that's the basic principle, and that's been around since the 80s. What we'll see is you have here it's a description of some of the major features or tools in HEVC, and I've also put here a comparison to what are the corresponding features in the previous standard, and you'll see that it's very much similar type of technology, but in HEVC you have more options. You have the ability to code in different sizes. So instead of, as you'll see to the right here, instead of always having a fixed block size predicting 16 by 16 pixels all the time, you have a choice of splitting up a large block into small blocks and adjusting to the content of how large portion can I predict in one go, or do I need to split it further? So that's the basic fundamental difference, that you have a lot of more flexibility. You have a few different new tools. For inter-prediction, for example, you have more directions to predict from previous pixels in the same frame, and so on. Interpolation filters is when you predict from a previous frame and you do a filtering, and you have better precision in HEVC than you had in H.264. So the true benefit of HEVC is when you have capacity or resources to explore all of these new options. And that's also why you typically see quite a bit of complexity increase when you start applying HEVC compared to previous codecs. If you don't take that into account and just look at what performance can you get if you have time to explore all of these options and really want to maximize the use of the codec, you will see 50% bitrate reduction or even more compared to H.264 AVC. So this figure is actually from the formal verification test of HEVC when they compare the reference software of HEVC, do a subjective test, compare that to the reference software of H.264 AVC, and you have persons looking at videos encoding at different rates, and then they score how good they think the video looks, and you average out, you get the mean opinion score, and you'll see for this particular sequence that if you want a really good quality, like 8.5 mean opinion score, with the H.264 AVC, you need almost 16 megabits per second, while with HEVC you can go below 8 megabits per second. So that's the gain you get from HEVC and the purpose, the reason why you would like to use HEVC instead of AVC. Now, as I mentioned, HEVC has actually been defined and it was completed roughly 5 years ago. So that was the version 1 of HEVC, and that's actually the version of HEVC that most people talk about when they talk about HEVC. But things has happened since then also. In the standardization group, there has been a lot of work on extensions to the core HEVC codec, and all of that is merged into the same specification. So it's added as different extensions to the specification. And over the years, you'll see that there have been quite a number of different profiles added to the HEVC codec. In the first version, you had the main profile, which is 8-bit version. You have the main 10, which supports 10-bit, and you have the main still picture profile. And those three are the only ones in the first version. But then in the second version, which is from a year later, you have all these extensions for different formats, for higher throughput, for scalable coding, where you have different layers, perhaps with different resolutions. And you have a multi-view extension where you have several different views, like in stereo coding. A year later, there was the 3D HEVC extension, which is HEVC plus normal video plus a depth information, which you can do quite cool stuff with. But and then last year, there was the screen content extensions. So that's adding tools specifically targeting to compressing screen sharing applications. So this type of content, if I would stream this, you would have specific tools that operate efficiently on this type of content. So it's important, if you talk about supporting HEVC, you also need to figure out which profiles or which extensions you're talking about, and depending on what application, might not. Typically, it's from the version 1 you talk about, but it might be interesting to look into other profiles as well. Now, going into the activities beyond HEVC, there's currently no work on adding even more extensions to HEVC, but there is quite some interesting activities in the MPEG group, specifically related to immersive media. There's just been I was at the MPEG meeting in Macau a couple of weeks ago, and there was an evaluation of technologies for compressing point clouds, which is a quite interesting new application. Instead of having one-dimensional video and instead of having like multiple views or a view and a depth, you have these points in space, which each point have its different color, and it's supposed to be giving you the ability to move around in space, and you can represent scenes which are much more like there are in the actual life. So that's an interesting activity. It's just started, but there's also a more general video coding activity that is expected to start in April next year, which is intended to run over several years. So there'll probably be a new video codec from MPEG and VKEG coming out probably 2020 or something like that. If you think this is interesting with the work from MPEG, I would recommend that you try to join the Swedish group that is responsible for the MPEG work, which is called TK302, which has its meeting here in Stockholm typically 4 times per year. Let me know if you would like to get some contact details there. There are some other initiatives. We'll hear in a few minutes about AV1, which is, a separate activity, not related to MPEG. And there's also this XVC, which is the codec that my company is developing. And I have a specific slide for that. So that's a software-focused video codec that we develop. It offers compression performance that goes beyond HEVC. It has a bit of a different thinking toward when it comes to the licensing model. Instead of having to deal with a lot of different instances for licensing, we try to arrange all of that from our side and keep so that for licensing XVC you just need to acquire a license from us, and the source code is available. It comes with a quite optimized decoder which runs efficiently on mobile devices. So one of the target applications of XVC is when you have extreme requirements for low bit rate, like even HEVC would be challenged to reach those compression levels. Then you can consider XVC, and you have a demo running on a mobile phone where you can do 720p, like 200 kilobits per second, that I would be happy to show. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much.
So should we open up for some questions? Oh.
One of the problems with licensing HEVC has been the royalty structure. In the development of the new codec, has there been any move to simplify that or to eliminate it?
Well, I think there are attempts like our XVC and the AV1, but I don't think there is anything structural like in MPEG there isn't anything spelled out towards doing something about it.
Are they talking about it? Is it recognized as a problem? Or?
Well, by some it's recognized as a problem, but it's not a topic that is on the agenda for MPEG meeting. It's considered to be out of scope of this technical group, so it's not discussed there.
Any more questions? Well, doesn't look like it. Then in that case, thank you very much.
Thanks.